Hello, this is Greg Smalley on Pod 366, a Weird Movies podcast, joined this week by Penguin Pete Turbovich. And later in the program, we will be joined by Roger Mitchell, who is the author of a book on Zardoz, the major book on Zardoz, I would say, called Zardoz Speaks to You: How a Classic Movie Was Created, Died, and Was Born Again. That was just released a couple of months ago and hot off the presses for a quite old movie, though. So, and Pete is a fan of Zardoz, I believe. So,
Huge, huge fan.
huge.
I got to say, that story resonates more and more today with all the artificial intelligence news coming out now.
Mm.
Just for the record, in case you're worried about, will people actually fall for artificial gods? I found an artificial intelligence Jesus on Twitch already. There's a Twitch channel where people can just type in their questions to an artificial intelligence Jesus. So
There you
there you
go. Hey,
go. We're on
well,
our way.
let's just make our own Jesus. If he doesn't come back in time, we can just make our own Jesus, right?
Yeah, and then you just give them a flying stone head and a few arbitrary rules about guns
Oh,
and sex, and there you go.
there you go. Guns are good, sex is bad. I don't know, who in the world would promote that ideology. I can't think of anybody, but
No.
let's get on to our news of this week, and we're going to start out with a bit of, I don't know, trivia news, a minor scandal, something like that. Pete, for people who can't see what we are looking at, what would you say we're looking at here?
Oh, well, we're, what a curveball. It's the title card from the movie The Godfather, and with a quote over it saying, a sloppy, self indulgent movie. Quote by Andrew Saris of The Voice, I believe.
Yeah, the Village
The
Voice.
Village Voice.
Yes. Um, so this is from the second trailer released for Francis Ford Coppola's Megalopolis. And so when I saw the second trailer, I said, boy, I like everything about that except for the presence of John Voight in the movie. But it turns out about an hour after it was released, there was somebody wrote an article about it. And if you haven't seen it, we will link it in the blog post. But the trailer begins with quotes from movies, from critics about movies like The Godfather and Apocalypse Now. And the premise is, well, critics panned these movies when they were initially released, but now they're universally recognized as classics. And
Ah.
that's an interesting take. But Pete, what was the problem with that?
I guess, as I understand it, when I saw the news story, apparently the quotes were not real, or not every quote was exactly word for word. Perhaps.
No, no, I think they were all made up.
Oh, okay.
In one case, it was taken from there was a bad review Roger Ebert gave of what was it? Dracula, Bram Stoker's Dracula, and the quote was actually from his review for Tim Burton's Batman. And other quotes were just totally made up, which is rather bizarre because it's like not really hard to track down actual quotes where critics got it wrong for famous movies when they were first released. There's really no need to make anything up. Uh, and yet they went ahead and did that for this trailer. So
Hmm.
I don't know. I do know I found some people commenting on the trailer itself. Roger Ebert himself called the trailer one of the biggest embarrassments ever released by a major studio. And Pauline Kael said the
Roger Ebert, you say?
Stinks like a wedge of stale camembert fermented in the sun for 3 days. Yes, Roger Ebert and Pauline Kael gave that trailer negative feedback. So
Okay. The trailer for Megalopolis.
Megalopolis, yeah.
Okay. Somehow I was under the impression that Roger Ebert had passed away.
And yet he's,
Okay.
he's still panning trailers.
All right. I'm sorry. I just got back from an alternate universe apparently, so I'll catch up.
All
All
right.
right.
All right. Let's move on to things that are more substantial, actual movie releases. What do we see here, Pete, for people who
Looks like a shot of a car driving down a tunnel, and from the various releases, I'm not too sure exactly which movie this is. It's a man driving, and there's a motorcycle in hot pursuit right behind his car, while the guy is just driving along. Maybe not concerned that he's being followed. Um, Interior shot with a lot of light and shadow and distortion here, so I can't really tell much more what's going on.
okay.
Which movie is this from?
It is from the only actual new release of this week, which is called a Belgian movie called L'Autre Laurens, or in English released as The Other Laurens.
Oh, the other Lawrence. Oh, yes. Okay. Um, yeah, I saw the trailer. It looked very stylish. And has some good music to it, I guess. Seems to be kind of a caper film. I'm picking up from it.
The trailer kind of reminded me of I got at least a Quentin Tarantino in the 90s vibe from it.
Yeah.
But what we know about it is the official plot description is a private detective is forced to face the ghost of his past when his niece asks him to investigate her father's death. So what? I guess the only reason there wasn't much out in theaters that was weird looking this week,
Yeah.
but this one caught my attention because number one, it's being released by Yellow Veil, who always releases strange movies. And I caught two reviews with one reviewer calling it Lynchian and a strange film. And the
Hmm.
Hollywood Reporter refers to it having bits of dark comedy and weirdness, which they ascribe to it being Belgian, because I guess the Belgians are known for their weirdness.
Hmm.
But
Well,
yeah, as you say, the trailer looks just kind of stylish to me. Looked like a caper film. Looked like might be Tarantino type thing. But
yep.
I do know also that it got mixed critics reviews, and the early IMDb returns do not look good. So it's
Hmm.
not a hit with audiences
Huh.
in Belgium, at least. Maybe it's too American for the Belgians or something. But anyway,
Or
that's the
Belgian for
other
American.
Laurens, which we will probably look out for on when it comes out on VOD. It is playing somewhere in the United States, so you can look
Okay.
if you're interested. But now
Interesting little wild card.
moving on to things that are coming out on VOD or physical media this week. What are we looking at here? We've seen this one before. I don't know if you were on the podcast for this one, but
Yeah, it's familiar. In fact, it's we're looking at a barren countryside road with a very poorly appointed bus stop. It looks like, with it's just a box with a large lamppost over it, and the title over it is Chronicles of a Wandering Saint. I believe it's a Spanish movie,
it's Argentinian.
Argentinian, something South American then. Okay, and And that's with a woman sitting in the bus stop, of course, a very isolated figure in a very wide shot, just showing that one person there. So this is apparently a wandering saint, and from what I pick up from the trailer, it's a religious themed movie with a person who may or may not be experiencing miracles, I guess, and lots of Catholicism and nuns and Christo rosaries in it.
Yeah, it's a so yeah, that's the plot. It's apparently about a woman who stages fake miracles and then real miracles, or at least things that can't be explained, start popping up. And it got very
Oh,
good reviews. It's going to be, because it's from South America, it's going to be tagged with magical realism, and it probably is. And we also believe from the trailer that it has heavy doses of comedy in it.
hmm.
And it has played theaters for, and probably still in some cinemas right now, but is arriving on VOD this week, at least on Fandango at Home service, which is used to be Voodoo, and it was bought
Hmm.
out by Fandango, and they renamed it Fandango at Home. And it's also on Apple Plus if you want to see it. And I believe I will be seeing it next week sometime
Ah,
for review.
all right.
So that is Chronicles of a Wandering Saint, now on VOD. Sort of limited venues on VOD, but it is on VOD. And here's our other movie, which we have also discussed when it was first released in theaters. I think you may have been in the room when we first discussed this one, but what do you see on the screen from this still?
Um, group of characters in a room. Looks like one person on the far right is just sitting down, like perhaps a piano player. There's but the focus is on a man in a gray suit, leaning on something and perhaps making a smiling or laughing point as he's talking and gesturing, and a woman next to him in a sparkly, shiny red dress with a brunette, and she's taking a hands-on, hip, skeptical stance to whatever the gentleman in the gray suit's saying, I presume. And that's about the closest clues I can get out of this. Would
Yeah,
this be the Crumb Catcher?
this would be the Crumb Catcher, yes.
Oh yeah, that movie. Okay, yeah, we did talk about that one.
And yeah, so I mean, what we have on that is it's about a newlywed couple suddenly accosted by a couple of weirdo entrepreneurs who want them to invest in their crumb catcher device, and apparently won't take no. And won't take no
Okay.
for, and so they sort of, bedevil these newlyweds on their honeymoon as if they were a horror movie monster slasher, but they're really just salesmen. Um,
Really aggressive salesman turned into a kind of home invasion story.
right. That's what. Yeah, that's the vibe I'm getting.
Oh
So
wow.
some critics use words like absurd and odd to describe it, and it is coming out everywhere on VOD this week. It got pretty good reviews, I would say. The on the decent side of good, and I do believe Giles Edwards plans to catch this one and review it next week. It apparently has caught his interest, so he has reserved that one. Crumb Catcher on VOD everywhere.
Yep. Was that one at the recent Fantasia Festival that Giles
No,
was at?
no, but we discussed it in that episode.
Oh, okay. But it wasn't at the
Released
festival.
was
Okay.
released to regular theaters while Josh, I always call him
Oh,
Josh. Giles was okay. And we have one Blu-ray release this week.
Oh boy.
Do you want to describe that? I just put up the back of the Blu-ray case, so there's a bunch of we can read the description, but there's not a lot to comment on. But what do you see?
You know, all you have to do, you don't even have to show me an image. All you have to do is show me the color, the dingy gray, steely gray color, and right away I know this is a dystopian movie, isn't it?
Yeah,
So yes, wearing the official colors of dystopia. It looks like a shot off the back of a Blu-ray cover or something. But our picture showing a very haggard looking down depressed fellow carrying a couple of shopping bags through what appears to be an apartment hallway, perhaps. And from the trailer, I see there is a whole lot of rundown apartments and I'd say Soviet bloc type architecture, brutalist architecture going on, and some kind of futuristic dystopia where people are struggling for survival. And you know, I'm just burnt out. I'm burnt out on dystopia. I am. I'm sorry. That's. It seems like there's one of these every week. But anyway. But yeah, give this one a chance. It looks like it could be unique. The trailer had a few interesting points to it. Sorry.
it is. The name is Undergods, and
Oh yes.
it was released 4 years ago, and it's just now coming out on Blu-ray, which is a sort of unfortunate new trend we're seeing as physical media becomes less and less important that they really wait until releasing the physical media version. And the other thing is this does not appear to have any kind of special features on it. Nothing, at least, is advertised at all on it, which is also a bit disappointing. You think that if you're going to go out and release a Blu-ray in today's age, you got to put at least a commentary and some featurettes on it, some interviews, something extra for fans.
Hmm.
But I will read, rather than reading from Giles. Giles really liked this movie when he saw it at Fantasia in 2020. And we do have an interview with the director, Chio Montoya. I probably mispronounced his name, but he is, I believe, one of the co-directors of this. I will read the copy here. Another worldly journey through a Europe in decline, Undergods is a collection of darkly humorous fantasy tales about failed societies and doomed fortune. Two corpse collectors roam the desolate streets of an unknown city, chatting humorously about their dreams, in which a series of men see their worlds fall apart through a visit from an unexpected stranger. Um, I would say the main thing with this movie is they found this location of, as you say, a deserted European city. I believe it's Estonian city,
Mm-hmm.
and they had found a deserted part of the city with all this ancient, crumbling, brutalist architecture, and thought, man, we have to make a film because this is an excellent, and it is. It's a beautiful location, and it fits the themes that the movie does. Um, Jazz liked it much better than I did. It's definitely a weird movie, though. I will tell you it's
All right, I'll give it a shot if it's weird.
it's not just dystopian. It's more the three or four stories that they tell all have some sort of surreal Twilight Zone twist to them. But that's
Yeah.
it for new releases. And before we bring out our guest, Roger Mitchell, to talk about Zard.
Zardoz time.
Hmm?
It's almost Zardoz time.
Almost Pete can't wait for
Zardoz time.
Zardoz time. There's just one last thing that I was going to put up, which is not a movie or anything, and I don't think you can describe this, Pete, but sort of do your best to just give a general overview of this very busy picture for people who can't.
It's exactly what you would expect if you went to any one of the thousands of artificial intelligence image generators and typed in, "Give me a psychedelic head,"
Mhm.
with surrounded by objects, with many myriad objects all around it. Um, so what's the catch?
Well, this is what uh, artificial image generator generated when I typed in, draw me a picture of what 366 Weird Movies looks like.
Ah,
And so,
really? That's all you
yeah,
typed?
that's what I typed. Yes, that was the cue. And this is what they came up with.
Uh,
Obviously familiar with our site, but it's a big skull. It looks kind of like a Day of the Dead skull.
Yeah, it's got yes, it's a skull made of lots of little tiny items, and with was this the only image, or was this like the 101st try you did?
No, there were four of them, and this was the best I thought. It has so the skull is kind of projecting a film strip from its eye.
I
It's
guess that's what it is. Yeah,
and
there is
then
just so much stuff and clutter in this. It looks like there's a soccer ball down there. There's a bunch of little like robots. It looks like excuse me, movie theater seating. It's got some. I guess there's some TV sets or cameras sitting in the audience too.
yeah,
Um, I think I see a jack o' lantern in the far right and a
yeah.
skeleton.
I think that
Looks like it really mixed in a lot of stuff.
it
So,
did.
which image generator did you use? Was this Mid Journey?
No, it was Copilot, which uses DALL-E in some.
Oh, Microsoft Copilot.
Yeah,
Okay, yeah, that one.
they access.
Anyway, was that Microsoft? Bing is the one that uses Copilot, right?
Yes,
Yeah. Yeah, anyway, I would totally not use this though for the cover of like a yearbook or anything because this would just date it in a few years.
it looks
It'll
too
be
AI.
that's the kind of image we're gonna look back on and say, "Oh yeah, I remember 2024 when everybody went crazy about AI images. They all have that rainbow color scheme, over hyperized, hyper texturized psychedelic to it, feel to it." I mean, it's something, and it's an interesting inspiration you could go from. But
I think,
sorry.
yeah, I may be.
Um,
I think it's the praise for AI art is kind of dying down from where it was a year ago or when it first came out and people were all crazy about it. But I actually like what AI can do and generate. I think the surrealist would have loved it, what it does, because it creates things by accident without rational thought that nevertheless have a certain order and rationality to them.
oh yeah, and the thing is, I guess maybe I'm less impressed because of my computer science background. Now you understand, I started out tinkering with artificial intelligence back in the 1980s and QBasic on DOS, and I was trying to make like chess programs that would teach itself how to learn. Go at the time, the board game Go was an unsolved problem in computer science. I was trying to take an approach like if anybody out there understands what I'm saying right now,
Yeah.
cellular automata like Conway's Game of Life. I was trying to apply that kind of real formula to Go pieces, where instead of looking at the whole strategy of the board, the different stones, your pieces would be talking to each other like cells, individual cells, and would act individually, in deciding where to place the next piece. Anyway, long story short, I've played with artificial intelligence a lot, and it's older than I am. If you look back on the writings of Marvin Minsky, and I wrote several generators. For one thing, the 3D animation graphic program POV Ray. It's also a C like syntax programming language too. So I scripted images that would actually generate random things. I was generating random cities. I was putting these up on my blog like 20 years ago, and everybody went, who cares? you know. But now artificial intelligence is doing it, and suddenly it's never been done before. Yes, it has. We've had so many image generators. So, and Photoshop can do that too.
Well,
But you'd be surprised how many things you can get that if you just put in the simplest instructions into a computer sometimes and give it a little bit of random determination, and it'll surprise you.
that's why I say, yeah, that's why I say it's authentically surrealist, and the surrealists would have loved it.
Yeah.
They love that. They love to use randomness in any way they could. Um,
Mm.
and it's sort of um, on a philosophical point, it sort of reveals that the fact that there's order in every random thing you generate just sort of reveals the nature of the universe, doesn't it? I mean, you can't be truly random. It's just unexpected, really.
Well, if you were truly random enough, then I guess the images would never be useful.
Yeah, yeah.
There you go.
I guess you could just do a Jackson Pollock painting of that.
Exactly, but it's hard to represent things with that Jackson Pollock style of painting, you see.
There we
So yeah, it's more like our conception of randomness is bound by our own thinking. We want things to be random, but then when it produces a symphony that's like one C note held for 87 years, we said no, not that kind of random, right? So it's random within our narrowing parameters,
Yeah.
and eventually you just come down to we're trying to model a little miniature person and give it rules, but a little bit of free will too. And we'll come closer to that goal in the future, I'm sure. Really, if the image generators would just break things up a little bit and try to at least attempt different styles besides this, besides the same the rainbow colored scheme, the candy colors, and the really psychedelic lit up, almost an 80s 90s palette, but plastered over this claymation type of texturing. It's yeah, you see it a lot. But anyway, don't mind me. I'm kind of a sourpuss right now on a lot of things that have been done this week. But on the other hand, Zardoz.
Yeah. Zardoz is not generated by artificial intelligence, although, it almost could have been given some of the
Yeah.
wackiness that we're going to talk about.
A point with Zardoz is that didn't Stanley Kubrick's Clockwork Orange come out only a couple years before Zardoz?
Yeah, yeah. Let's see, what's the date? I mean, I can look it up.
I'm pretty sure.
I think,
It's
what was
just
I
that,
saying?
Kubrick's Clockwork Orange also looks wildly goofy.
Hmm.
In another universe, it could have the same reputation as Zardoz. Zardoz, the thing with it is, it's not completely a bummer because it has a good science fiction movie inside there. And then, and then they decided, well, let's be the future, so we're going to hang mannequins everywhere and put pants on our head, and and we have to attract the kids to the theater, so let's put in this psychedelic sequence, and things just went off the rails from there. But
All right. Well,
but at the same time, it tries to be a serious science fiction movie. Okay, I'll let you. Sorry.
Clockwork Orange was 71 and Zardoz was 74. So, yeah.
Yeah, just 3 years earlier.
Yep. So,
Anyway,
yeah. Well, let's talk to Roger Miller about. I did call him Roger. I said I was going to slip up and call him Roger Miller, but it's Roger Mitchell about Zardoz. We're going to pause and come right back with our guest, Roger Mitchell, to talk about Zardoz and his Zardoz book. So no time will pass for you. All right. Bye-bye. See you soon.
magic.
Hello, this is Greg and Pete, and we're back with Roger Mitchell, author of Zardoz Speaks to You, How a Classic Movie Was Created, Died, and Was Born Again. I have a copy here, but it doesn't show up really well because I've got my background on.
Just hold it right in front of you because it's not cutting you, but it's cutting the background.
There's a good one.
Anyway. Oh, he's got one.
By chance, folks, I
By
have a
chance.
copy myself here, you know. It
Yeah.
seems like an awfully good read.
And he's
Oh,
joining
yes.
us from Ireland. Where about in Ireland?
I grew up in Limerick,
Limerick.
which is down there's Ireland, and Limerick is sort of down there somewhere. And Limerick is a place of rain and drizzle. And walking past the Savoy Cinema one day when I was supposed to be going home on the bus, I saw this weird poster with this weird guy standing on a hand. And I thought, I've got the choice of going home on the bus or seeing this film. Little did I know this would lead me, essentially 50 years later, to talking to the host, the co-host, and all the masked maniacs of the world out there about the book that I wrote about the damn thing.
Well, goodness, that was
But
actually
John is good. Sorry.
you actually started answering my first question, which was just the introductory question of how did you get I sort of interested to obsessed with the movie Zardoz, and it was seeing it at an impressionable age, I guess.
Mm,
But what
mm.
what happened after that? How did it grow? Your interest in the film grow?
I think your point about being at an impressionable age is very, very important because when you're about 14, you feel fairly sophisticated, you know, and you can go to the cinema on your own. You don't need your mother with you, but you don't necessarily feel the need to understand everything. I think at about 14 and younger, you're able to see something rich and strange without demanding that it be understandable. And of course, one of the things about Zardoz that I always say, if you can trick somebody into watching the damn thing twice, then they're hooked for life. If they only see it once, they're going to be saying to you, well, what was, you know, rather like the effect that 2001 A Space Odyssey has on a lot of people. You see it again and you go, oh, I see how this connects. I see where this is going. I see actually how it is a message. A lot of it is a message that relates even now today. And this is one of the things about Zardoz. It was such a disaster for so long. Zardoz was on so many worst film of all time lists. And it's somehow it swung around, and people going, actually, this damn film, it relates to today. So I saw the thing by accident in a cinema in Limerick, the Savoy Cinema, now demolished, as all cinemas have been. Um, and I went to school and I just said, you know, this is the weirdest. I've got to see it again. Told all my friends. And of course, by the following Saturday, it was gone because Zardoz opened big everywhere. Looking at the paperwork, you can see that Zardoz opened big everywhere, as it would being a Sean Connery film. And then within days, it would fall over a cliff. That no longer happens because of the internet, because of streaming, because of so many midnight movie performances. People have been exposed to it. People have seen it twice. I went to college. I went to film school in England. My desire to be a filmmaker partially created by our dear friend Zardoz, you know, because a film that amazes you at a certain age can have a strong effect on you. I had to do a college thesis about something. And, you know, everyone to suck up is doing Citizen Kane, you know, which is a lovely film. Certainly is a nice film. And I did Zardoz because partially because nobody else had heard of it, and partially because everybody else that had heard of it hated it. But I was very lucky. See, now this was 1982, 3, that sort of time. Now, for me, this was a film from my childhood, a bit like, oh, you know, someone ought to write a book about the Wizard of Oz. That's an awfully good film. Or to the people I went to interview, and I went and interviewed the director, the designer, the editor. I was able to reach these people. For them, it was something, it was a collective, enthusiastic, weird enterprise they'd been involved in like 9 years before. You know, that's no time at all. To me, it was half a lifetime ago. To them, they were going, yeah, well, I did this, this, and this. Do you want to see this drawing? You want to see this photograph? You want to see, here's the script, you know? they were really enthusiastic about it, because people who made the film, they knew they were making something kind of peculiar. I mean, it was damn peculiar from the beginning, but they were dead keen to talk about it. And I was very lucky to talk to some people then who have since died. And I was very lucky to talk to people like John Boorman, who wrote it, produced it, directed it, put some of his own money into it when the damn thing went over budget. The designer, Tony Pratt, absolute genius. He was the guy that came up with this gigantic floating head thing, which we'll talk about later. And a guy who nobody has ever heard of, a guy called Bill Stair, who was an artist and writer who had worked with John Boorman on many films before, like Point Blank and Deliverance, Hell in the Pacific. He was an ideas guy. He was a drawing guy. He was a designing guy. I can tell you more about him later, but very, very pleased to have met Bill Stair, Tony Pratt, and John Boorman particularly, because they were the hearts of Zardoz and where it came from and how it got to us.
Wow. So you keep anticipating my questions, because
sure, yeah.
My next question about the book was going to be about all the people you interviewed, because you really have interviews with just about anybody who was involved with the film. There's probably some production assistant in there, and so I was wondering first how you got to them. Apparently, you started early. I wouldn't have guessed you had started the research that early.
I mean,
but the
wasn't
other
going to be
thing I was going to ask is, was there anybody that you weren't able to talk to that you wanted to? Maybe because they passed on, or
yes, or because they were playing golf. You know,
and who was that?
And who was that? There's one particular culprit here. No, the thing is, Connery, and I've talked to John Boorman about this. He said that Connery's life was practically destroyed by the amount of attention, by the amount of adulation, by Japanese guys with cameras crawling under under the door of a public toilet to try and photograph James Bond. You know?
Oh my God.
Yeah. During You Only Live Twice, the Japanese people were immensely enamored of James Bond, and they would do anything to get at him. And it nearly drove him completely mad. Connery had quit Bond, but of course, then people were offering him, hey, you know, do you want to go to Marrakesh to shoot a James Bond ripoff? And he's going, no, I don't. I'm an actor, you know. And I've met many as an actor in my time, and there are two types of actor. There's the one who becomes a new person, the person they're portraying, the Meryl Streeps of the world, becomes and is almost unrecognizable at times from themselves or from a previous role. There's another type of actor, Spencer Tracy, Humphrey Bogart, Margaret Rutherford, who are themselves, and you're so delighted to see them. But every actor I've ever met has said, look, give me a challenge. I can play James Bond. I can play a small Irish leprechaun sitting on a toadstool. I can play a dog. I can play a chair. Let me show you all the things I can do. And that was what was driving Connery completely nuts. But the publicity that he had drove him away from talking to people about how he felt about things. You know, he would give the interview, oh, yes, a wonderful time, wonderful director, terrific crew, a marvelous story. How he felt about things, he was never going to tell people. That was completely private. So I wrote years ago to Sean Connery. Of course, I never heard from him. I tried to get hold of Charlotte Rampling. Now, both of those people are represented in the book. I managed to find some quite rare interviews with them, including one with Connery talking about his issues with anger and his issues with dealing with women in a way that was not related to sexuality. And this was from a very rare interview that it took me 20 years to find in some magazine that had been printed in, 1969 or something like that. So I wasn't able to get hold of Connery. I wasn't able to get hold of Charlotte Rampling. Who else? Oh, one person I was really sad I couldn't get hold of was a guy called Jeffrey Unsworth, who was the lighting cameraman on the film, and he was most famous for doing 2001: A Space Odyssey. I can talk to you more about Unsworth's contribution to the film later, but it would have been very nice to talk to him. But I talked to his camera operator, Peter MacDonald. He went on to be a director, particularly a second unit director. He did second unit on Tim Burton's Batman. You know, he was up there, and I tell you a funny thing, every single person I actually talked to were still enthusiastic about this film, were still pleased that they had done it, even though it had been at the time a critical disaster. But they were all really, really keen on being directed by John Boorman, on being in one of his films, and in being in a film that had such imagination and scope. And as Boorman says, there's too much in it. Boorman said to me, he said, I put every idea I could think of into this film. He said, it's no wonder people can't get through it, because there's just one idea after another after another. And one of the things I say in the book is, quite often the most important things that build the story are referred to very quickly. They kind of whizzed past you. One thing I can say is that Boorman had final cut. Now, most directors do not have final cut. A number of directors and producers who find that because the studio paid for their movie, they deliver it, and the movie goes, this is a bit too long. Perhaps we'll cut the end off. There's a film called Phase 4. Brilliant film.
Oh.
Yeah, ants are taking over the world. The entire last section of that film was just removed by the studio, who didn't like it, and they put something else in. Boorman himself had made a film called Hell in the Pacific about an American soldier, a Marine, and a Japanese soldier who end up marooned on an island during World War II. Can two people who hate each other so much actually form any sort of mutual understanding? By the end of the film, they have. The producers tacked on an explosion that they bought from somewhere, killing the soldiers. And Boorman didn't even know they'd done that until he went to see the film in London. And in his film, these two guys build this friendship and are then killed in an explosion that wasn't in his cut of the movie. Now, from then on, he swore he would never make another film where he didn't have final cut.
Similar,
Well, when somebody,
similar to David Lynch after Dune.
Yeah, absolutely. Lynch is an artist, and Lynch said, I'm not touching this hot potato again until I have, but if you have final cut, who can say to you, that bit,
Yeah.
or perhaps a little bit more explanation or I don't know. But listen, I want to know more of these questions you got, because to be absolutely honest, you can wind me up and I'll just go for 40 minutes. So what have you got, and what will I be embarrassed to answer?
I'm gonna let Pete ask some questions, which will probably be movie specific, I'm guessing. Come up with something, Pete.
I did look at your preview of the Amazon on Amazon there with the book, and I noticed in the opening that you actually have a quote from Kurt Vonnegut, one of my top 3 favorite authors, from Cat's Cradle, as a matter of fact.
Yeah.
And that's very interesting, because Cat's Cradle, I think it has a bit of synergy between that and Zardoz. Do you see that?
Zardoz is interesting that essentially Boorman was a science fiction reader, very big on Kurt Vonnegut, very big on John Wyndham, all sorts of influences thrown in there. Yeah, I think the Cat's Cradle thing, I think that, that does hold water. The number of influences in it. There's a guy who helped me enormously with source material and library stuff. He at one point wanted to write a chapter for me on influences. In fact, it didn't happen. I'll tell you one thing. When you send your manuscript to the publisher and they say, boy, we like this manuscript, but we cannot print a 700-page book. Okay, things have to get chucked. Yeah, there are certain it says in the book, Man and Superman by George
Okay.
Bernard Shaw is not about Superman.
Hmm.
So John Boorman's aunt, when he was little, didn't know that, and she bought him a book called Man and Superman, thinking it was about Superman. He read George Bernard
Oh, great.
Shaw, and he started reading lots of George Bernard Shaw. And there's one George Bernard Shaw book where you've got a race of immortal people who spend their time controlling and fooling the short-lived people outside by appearing as gods to them and controlling them. So there's all sorts of things I'm sure there's loads of stuff in there that I've never spotted just because I haven't been exposed. You've probably read loads of stuff that you'll say, actually, yeah, there's a
Oh yeah.
parallel as well. Yeah.
Oh yeah. In fact, I happened to write a blog post about Zardoz myself
Mhm.
on Sean Connery's 90th birthday,
Ah,
which, as you know, Sean Connery passed away only days later after that posted. Wouldn't you know it?
yeah, yeah.
But
Well,
yeah, I did
that's
point
a
out that
poison
there are
pen
a
letter.
number. Huh?
That's a poison pen letter. Of
Yeah,
a,
I know. I'm famous for that too. You wouldn't believe how many times that's happened.
perhaps I
But
shouldn't be
anyway,
talking to you.
yeah, I pointed out there's a lot of influences you can track down. Robert A. Heinlein, for one, did a whole lot of immortality is a theme that if you even have it as a person, there's themes there where humans weren't intended to be gods. So
Mm,
when you get immortal enough, then you get bored in the long term. Robert A.
mm,
Heinlein did that a lot with his Lazarus Long character.
mm,
There's really the H.G. Wells Time Machine is another thing that
mm,
I think kind of synergizes with Zardoz because the Time Machine has the separation of society into different characters in the future, different tribes, as it were.
mm, mm.
Morlocks versus Eloi, if I'm pronouncing them right.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Anyway, so
Yeah,
yeah, there's a whole bunch of that stuff. You can kind of trace down a few influences from Asimov's work, and all this stuff was published work at the time. So
yeah.
I think it might have been. I think that might have been Borman's. Some of Borman's reading, but
I think
most
so,
telling of
yes.
all is when Borman originally wanted to do Lord of the Rings, and they turned him down for that.
He didn't really want to,
Oh,
but it was offered to him.
oh, really?
It wasn't his idea to do it.
Okay.
He was offered it, uh, and he thought, this is pretty good. This is a pre-sold audience, And I mean, he will have read the thing already.
Mm.
Pardon me, drinking absinthe there. Yeah, he was offered it, and he said, "Yeah, this I could sure do that."
So what happened to that?
What happened was he brought in a guy called Rospo Pallenberg, who was a guy that he knew he was an architect, Italian guy, and he had a mind, Borman felt, that could take very complicated situations and just by dropping out a character, by dropping out a scene, by compressing things, by turning things around, squash it down. Because you understand, he was going to be making one movie. He was going to be taking 3 books of Lord of the Rings and making them into one movie. So in essentially 1.5 hours, that's half an hour per novel. It's essentially impossible.
No, no,
Uh,
no.
so he and Rosper sat down, they bought 2 copies of the book and they tore every page out and they stuck them on the wall. They could read the whole damn book and said, well, we need that bit, we don't need that bit, we need that, we don't, we need it. I've read it, and Borman himself says, thank God that Peter Jackson made his film, partially because of the length of the thing, but
Yeah.
partly because of special effects. Borman's plan, how do you do the hobbits? Borman always replaced his dialogue. Borman would always re-record the dialogue, as films to this day do, because an aeroplane went over, or because when you think about it, you're shooting a scene. You might shoot Charlie on Monday, you might shoot Billy on the other side of the scene 3 days later with a refrigerator running in the background. And how do you get all of the get it to sound like one performance so you can redo the dialogue um,
Oh.
for the whole thing. Borman's plan was if he hired children to be the hobbits, made up, and put adult voices on them. Now you see, you're going, not too sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, not too sure about that. Borman knew a lot about special effects because when he worked in Hollywood on Point Blank, which was his first feature film, he was working at MGM. Now, MGM had made The Wizard of Oz. MGM had made. I was watching a Tarzan film. I'm pretty sure it was an MGM Tarzan film the other day, and purely using opticals, they were getting live lions to attack and cling onto the faces of live elephants. How the heck did they do that? Anyhow, the point is, he was there at MGM in the last great days of MGM when all the old guys were still there. And he was sucking in this stuff of special effects. You can make a model of something. You can get a mirror, you can scratch some of the mirror off, and then you can reflect the set while looking through the hole, all sorts of clever stuff. And Zardoz is covered in these very old-fashioned special effects. But no matter how big your budget was, trying to do the Lord of the Rings back in 1969 or whatever the heck it was, it couldn't have been anywhere near as what we see in the Peter Jackson version. Yeah.
Right, which is why I guess they tried animation first, which seemed like it would be promising with Ralph Bakshi a couple years later. So, Pete, do you have more questions, or I can come up with some if you don't?
Pete, I'm going to
It's your turn.
I'm going to interrupt you. We were talking about influences on the film.
Oh.
The original, you both seen the film.
Yeah.
Maybe somebody out there has seen the film as well.
Religiously.
You'll go to hell. The original script starts off with an airship flying along.
Well,
and
yeah.
At that point in the script, it was Lee Marvin. You can imagine that. Lee Marvin is inside a coffin in an airship. And he comes out of the coffin and he says, "Where am I?" And he looks out the window and you realize you're flying along. You're in an airship. Okay. The guy that designed Zardoz couldn't. Now, Tony Pratt had worked on 2001. He had worked on 2001 until Stanley Kubrick fired him. Tony Pratt can't draw, he said. Anyhow, so, but he said he couldn't work out, how do you design a futuristic airship that doesn't look like something out of 2001 with buttons inside and control rooms and, like fins and anyhow. I don't know. Are you in America aware of a thing called Thomas the Tank Engine?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, so Thomas the Tank Engine is a train and he's got a happy face on the front. Anyhow, this designer, Tony Pratt, he suddenly thought, what do I do with this? And he thought, could the face of the god be kind of on the front of the airship? And he suggested it to Borman, and he said, no, just make the whole thing a face, make the whole thing a head. Now, this does something really weird because...
Oh, you have one.
I have one. Now, the point is, the human brain is designed to communicate with a face. Yeah. So if you put a face there, now you're thinking, well, that guy, is he angry? Is he sad? What does he want? What does that intelligence want? And suddenly, what had been an airship in the script, it's now a character. It's now a character with a personality. And then you think, oh, I'll get all of the exterminators that follow this god, and I'll give them the same face. And worse than that, I'll stick the face on the front and the back. It takes away their individuality, but it makes them part of this god body. Anything that an exterminator does, is what
Yeah.
God would, because they are God themselves in a way. So this weird thing, imagine Zardoz with just like an airship. It doesn't have nearly the impact. There's something
Oh
about his
no.
gigantic personality floating around out there.
He's got another Zardoz head.
He's got, well, this was actually to demonstrate the thing I was going to say to you. There's an amazing thing about Zardoz fandom that
Okay.
there
All
are
right. He's got the
you can
models.
you can buy little guys, yeah. And a friend of mine made that.
Okay.
You can find, if you go on various websites, you can find Zardoz things, you can find badges and belt buckles, and you can find t-shirts. And yeah, the point is, none of that stuff is licensed. The studio has never done anything with Zardoz. When you think about the amount of stuff for Iron Man, the Batman, the Star Wars, you think of all that stuff, they licensed it. There was this enormous desire. They thought they could push it, they could get loads of money. For Zardoz, there's never been anything. There's
Wow.
one novel and there's one trading card, which I'm sure is a pirate. So that just talks about the strength of the fans' love of this film, that they will make stuff. They say, well, there's no stuff. I'll have to make stuff. I'll have to make my own videos. I'll have to make my own, whatever the heck it is. I'm going to show you one thing. I'm sorry, this is ignoring your questions completely.
No, no, you're fascinating.
I'm not. Oh, I'm not fascinating. Back when I was a student, so I did this thesis, and I thought I want a good front cover for the thesis. I want me talking to an intelligent diamond, a giant diamond, a crystal, just like in the film. Okay, so I've got a friend of mine. He's going to come over. He's going to photograph me holding the crystal. But I didn't have a crystal. Now, where the heck do you get a giant crystal that you can hold in your hand with 3 days' notice? Cheap. And I was racking my brains. And it was the Friday night, and the guy was coming over on the Saturday morning. And I thought, how the heck? And I suddenly stopped and I thought, and I'm in a rented flat, right? I'm in a rented flat, student flat. And I thought, just look at the doorknob of my bedroom.
Huh.
That is
Okay.
the doorknob from my bedroom when I was a student. And if you look under there, you can see there's a circle on the underside of it where I sawed it off the door. So I'm just saying, Zardoz fans are mad enough to cut their own doorknobs off for this film. Just
Oh
remember.
wow. Oh yes.
Just remember.
So that actually brings up a question.
A legitimate question.
Yes, do you have any rare pieces of memorabilia from the actual film?
I have one
Sure you
thing
do.
here. I have one thing here, which is a treasured thing. This is the original shooting script. This was used in the cutting room by the editor and by his assistant, and it was given to me by a wonderful guy called Alan Jones, who was the assistant film editor on the film. He moved on to do Pink Panther movies. He was an assistant film editor, and on his next film, I think after Zardoz, he was assisting, and the editor got sick, and Blake Edwards said, "Oh, we don't need another editor. This guy's really good. We'll keep him." So suddenly he was an editor. He got his union ticket and all that kind of stuff. Now this here, which I was showing you, is the very, very few exterminator masks left in the world. And that I got, I chatted up the guy who was running the film studios where it was shot years ago when the place was actually closing down. It had gone bankrupt. And I said to him, look, if there's anything left from this film there, and he got me, in fact, you can see the back. The back isn't quite so good. The back is a little bit distorted. But he got me two halves and I joined them together. But that, when the house is burning down, this is one of the things that goes out the window with me.
What's that? What's the material? What's it made out of? Plaster?
Well, it's actually very light stuff. It's vacuum formed plastic. Because the film was made essentially for $1 million. Now, Stanley Kubrick well, he eventually didn't have a budget of $10 million, but he eventually spent $10 million doing 2001. So Zardoz, which was made later, had essentially $1 million, and a quarter of that went on Sean Connery's salary. So you're trying to make a film with so many ideas, with so many special effects, with so many, with the way it looks, because nothing looks like Zardoz. You've got really good people there making a film on absolute peanuts. As good as that, terrific. So anyhow, it's very surprising that has survived. John Boorman's got one. There's one in a museum in America. I don't know. There probably aren't any. They're easy to print. So those are the things that I've got from the production.
Wow, it's amazing.
I will say, for potential purchasers of the book, there are a lot of behind-the-scenes photos and artists' renderings and so forth in the book. It is, are these actual storyboards, or are they recreations that are in here?
No, those are Tony Pratt's storyboard. Yeah. And he said to me, John used to really like my storyboards. He said, because he said that they helped him nod off at night. But the thing is, you've got to have storyboards, particularly for any special effects sequence, just so that everybody knows what they're doing. Is this thing coming in from the left, or is it coming in from the right? Is it shot against a blue background or a green background? Where are the people? Are they models? All that stuff you have to storyboard, particularly effects sequences, and they did. It was a small budget film, but it had absolutely top quality people doing it. It had the big stars. It had Connery and Rampling. It had a Oscar-winning cinematographer, and you put them all together, and they created something that has lasted through thick and thin for 50 years.
All right, Pete, do you have time for another question? We have 5 minutes left, and so
Yeah, I'll pass this round.
you'll pass. I'll tell you what. Why don't I get the final question out of the way, and then we'll see if we have time for other questions after that, because we have a traditional final question, non-Zardoz related, that we ask every guest, which is, and you can do it quickly if you want, and we can maybe squeeze in some more Zardoz. But the question is, where is your hometown, which I think we've already determined, and can you recommend a restaurant there?
Limerick and Ireland itself, and I'll be hung for saying this, used to have probably the worst cuisine ever in the history of the universe. Yes, I'm loath if I can remember the name of it. There is a burger place in Limerick, it's on the end of a bridge, just on the edge of town. It's a burger place, and one of the exciting things about it is they give you a box with a light on it, and when your burger is ready, it beeps, and then you have to go down and get the burger. But it's a very good burger.
All right. So we got that out of the way. We can get back to Zardoz questions. So we don't have time for much, but I think maybe a question. One of the things everybody remembers about the movie that's seen it is Sean Connery's costume and the Brutal's costumes. How did that design come about? And did they think it was a really good idea and audiences didn't? Or
first of all, it was a really good idea.
Okay.
Because who else but a super sexual Superman could wear that? Okay. You'd have to be at the top of your game before you could wear that. The other thing, where that came from, the original plan was to hire a guy called Cecil Beaton, who was a really famous designer and photographer, and he was too expensive. And Boorman turned to his wife and he said, "Look, I really think you could do it." And she said, "Me?" And he said, "Yep." And she said, "You never know what you're going to get." And he said, "Well, that's exactly it. I don't want something predictable." And it's that simple. She sat down. She just had a budget of a certain, I don't know, £7,000 or whatever the heck it was, and she drew up stuff. And she said, "What about this?" They said, "Yeah, go, because we have no time to think about anything else. We're doing the sets, we're doing the actors, we're dealing with Burt Reynolds, who is the star of our film, but
Oh.
he has just had a massive hernia on the set of The Man Who Loved Cat Dancing, and with a week to go before we shoot the film, Mr. Reynolds is no longer available. What the heck do we do now?" Will I tell you?
Now we know the
Will I
rest
tell
of
you
the
what
story.
Will I tell you what they did then? They went to Richard Harris. And Richard Harris said, "Yes, I'll come over for lunch. I'll talk to you." And Richard Harris got drunk and he never turned up. So they rang Sean Connery and they found him on a Scottish golf course. Where else? And he said he'd do it for the price. He said he'd do it for the. He had them over a barrel. He could have asked for twice as much. He said, "I'll do it for the same amount you were going to give Burt Reynolds." And that's why he's in the movie, because they found him with 10 minutes to spare.
All right. That's so we probably could have talked for another half an hour, but we are essentially out of time with just a minute left. But boy, Roger, you really just have a infectious enthusiasm for Zardoz, and it's no wonder that you're the one who wrote this book. I can see why now you've written the major work on Zardoz, which is called Zardoz Speaks to You.
Holding it up invisibly really isn't going to work. The only thing I can say to you folks is that my wife says, "Well, now at last you can shut up about it."
Well, we'll see how that works out for her.
Those are her words.
All right. Well, we have less than 30 seconds, so we are going to sign off so we don't have the awkward conclusion that we usually do where people are cut off at the end. So thanks so much for being here, Roger Mitchell. Book is Zardoz Speaks to You. Thanks, Pete, and we'll see you next week, guys.
Thanks, folks. Bye-bye to everyone.
Bye-bye.
Thank you very much.